Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. Okay, we're having a million technical difficulties today, but we're here. We made it. We're dedicated, and no matter what forces are around that want to silence us, they cannot. We are pushing through, breaking through, not allowing anything to stop this podcast from happening today. So, welcome, welcome everyone to the show today, Conscious Women Connect podcast. This is the show where we talk to women about their basically spiritual life journey. It's not restricted to any one like lineage or group. It is simply about women, inspiring women. And the reason I started this podcast is because I feel like it is really important for women to connect to each other. And I feel like today in 2025, we have so much going on and everybody's in their phone, and we have a new kind of reality where people in different niches in different areas of life are spread out all around the world. So why not connect through the internet as people do, and feel some kind of sangha, like women's sangha connection together. Yes. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. And yes, I
Okay.
agree. Take advantage of the technology. It doesn't all have to be bad, you know?
Yep, correct. So today we have our guest, originally from Hawaii, Noelani,
Hmm.
correct?
Correct.
Saying
You
that
got it.
saying that right. So we've been speaking a little bit and talking about her journey with Krishna Consciousness and Krishna Bhakti and the journey of life and how things change, how things go on. Yeah. So please, Noelani, introduce yourself. Tell us about yourself.
Life be lifing. So yeah, I'm Noelani, and I'm currently right now, I just got accepted into a doctorate program of psychology in Los Angeles. Currently I'm living in North Carolina, however, so I'm preparing myself for quite the trip in the summertime, which I'm looking forward to. Lots of feelings, good and bad. But yeah, in terms of just something about myself, I guess we had talked earlier about just sort of the start of the journey for me, right? I was born in Honolulu, Hawaii, where I spent a majority of my childhood, and it really living on an island like that really shapes your development massively.
Mhm.
Um, it's a beautiful island, and I feel very lucky to have grown up in like the tropics, right?
Mhm.
Um, However, you know, as things go with everybody, we all got things going on from time to time, right? And so I was there living in paradise, and unfortunately, my home life was not so. It was not matching with the weather, with the vibe.
Mhm.
Um, I'm a child of a alcoholic father and a drug addict mother. And so, yeah, a majority of my upbringing was surrounded by a lot of drugs, a lot of alcohol, and neglect and mental health issues. And so I guess that's what we're gonna really dig into today.
Yeah, for sure. You shared, I feel like really it was only a little snippet of your story with me on through our messages. And I mean, we don't have time today for a whole in-depth life story, of anyone really on this show. It's so short. We do just, few hours, but you mentioned that, I mean, you mentioned some things about your life story, and why don't you just basically recap
You want me to
what,
recap? Yeah,
yeah, for sure.
absolutely. That's
Yeah.
totally fine. So yeah, let's just start with adolescence, shall we? I mean, because there was like all the trauma and drama of pre-adolescence, but let's just start at age 13.
Mhm.
That is when I had my first drug. It was a muscle relaxer, some pharmaceutical, something like.
Mhm. Mhm.
At this point, I had been living with my parents' addictions, from infancy, I'm assuming.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, And so it wasn't anything odd to me when I was offered by my mother
Mhm.
some pills, because I don't know if I was cramping, I was 13, so I don't know what
Mhm.
was going on, but it was like,
Mhm.
oh, here's a solution. So
Mhm.
instead of like giving me, some Tylenol, it was like,
Mhm.
oh, like here's a really strong muscle relaxer.
Mhm.
But I loved it. And that's the funny part, it's just like I hadn't, I wasn't aware of how challenging my life was yet.
Mhm.
I knew there were pieces that were different and
Mhm.
uncomfortable, but I think, as a child, you sort of assume everybody's living the same kind of life. At least
Yeah.
I did. And so that first pill gave me almost a sense of euphoria, and it was my first sort of engagement with happiness,
Mhm.
if that makes sense.
Mhm.
And so after that, it was just sort of like, yeah, let's go. And you know, throughout my adolescence, my parents, it's the nature of addiction. Addiction, it doesn't get better untreated. It just
Mhm.
sadly, it gets a lot worse. And so,
Mhm.
13 was one thing. And by the time I was hitting 14 and 15, my my mother's drug addiction was just getting out of control. My father's drinking was to a point where I never saw him sober.
Mhm.
They lost their jobs. My parents were both nurses, and my mom lost her license for forging scripts. My father lost his license for showing up to work drunk
Mhm.
all the time and leaving med cabinets open and, things like that. And so it was just living in somebody else's progression of their disease, of their addiction, was
Mhm.
basically my life. And so naturally, mine got worse too.
Mhm.
And by the time I hit, I want to say like 14, 15 is when I was like, oh, let's try meth. That's a good idea. What?
Mhm. Mhm.
It was readily available at the school that I went to,
Mhm.
um, which is wild. You think about schools and
Yeah.
really going on, right? But it
Mhm.
was. And again, that like bliss. Oh my gosh, I am not self-conscious right now. I'm so confident. I can talk to anybody
Mhm.
who is passing me by. I can make friends with anybody. And that was huge for me because growing up the way I did, I didn't have a lot of confidence. I was a very scared, anxious, highly anxious person, terrified to
Mhm.
talk to people, did not want them to really perceive me in general. And so I think using drugs gave me this false sense of like, oh, like, I can do this. I can live in the world like this. But again, it was a false sense. And so I started with the math, and then I started, really not going to school because why would I do that? I'm not
Mhm.
going to go to high school.
Mhm.
And meanwhile, I'm taking pills like a maniac. And
Mhm.
this was back in the 2000s. Okay, so I'm a Y2K girly. And this
Rave culture.
yes, yes. And I
Yeah.
was at the clubs, let me tell you. But
Mm.
so this is also when the pharmaceutical company was really pushing OxyContin like
Mm.
hard on
Mm.
everybody. And they were like, it's not addictive, you'll be fine.
Mm.
It's addictive.
Yeah.
No, right? And I actually, like, by the time I was 15, 16, my doctor was prescribing me OxyContin, my father OxyContin, and my mother OxyContin because we
For
had
what?
pain, I guess. You know,
Okay.
yeah, you say you're in pain and they're like, "Oh, here, this will help." Like, no,
Mhm.
no questioning like why is a 15, 16-year-old in pain? I really
Mhm.
was, but I now looking back understand, well, you were being repeatedly traumatized and your anxiety level was like here. And so now
Mhm.
your body is like all tensed up all the time. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're in pain, right? And so I got physically so addicted to it. I couldn't even go without it at one point without
Mhm.
going through severe withdrawals. And that was my family dynamic. We were all just using in this house, not
Mhm.
really talking to one another. I was going out to the clubs and, making the most intensely dangerous choices. I mean, you
Mhm.
can think like, as teenagers, our brain is definitely not fully developed, especially the
Mhm.
part that's for decision making, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I was just like, sure, I'll get into this stranger's car, or oh, I'll go to a hotel room with you. You have drugs, right? Like, this is a good idea.
Mhm.
Um, and a series of sort of just breaking the law, stealing, just no direction. I had no direction. And so I was just making horrible choices. And
Mhm.
I think I had mentioned to you, it was 16. And this is like the height of just me just being like completely insane, quite
Mhm.
frankly. I was getting arrested all the time. And there was one day I got arrested for shoplifting because that was just,
Mhm.
we were also very poor. So I would
Mhm.
also steal things I wanted and food and, tampons, things that I needed.
Mhm.
But I got caught. And it's super embarrassing to get caught shoplifting. It's
Mhm.
humiliating, especially when you know you're just making horrible choices and doing all this to yourself, right?
Mhm.
And so they took me to jail. And I sat in that holding cell and it was dirty and gray and just there's pee and snot and whatever. And I waited for my parents
Mhm.
and I had to wait because my mom had to take the bus to come get me because,
Mhm.
mind you, my father had totaled our car because he got drunk and went driving.
Mhm.
And so that was our transportation, was the bus. And so she came and she got me. And man, just the emotional exhaustion. I remember thinking, I feel like I'm 50 years old. I'm 16. I feel so
Yeah.
old all the
Mhm.
time. Why do I feel so old? But so she picks me up and we don't really talk a lot because, the thing with my mother, she was an addict and she did the best she could with what she had. And the one thing that I cannot deny, I know she loved me, and I know that in this moment too, that she knew that she was very responsible for a lot of what was going on. And so we're sitting on this bus. I'm literally just sitting in the front, like just crying, just quietly crying, tears coming down. My mom is sitting a few seats down. I'm too embarrassed to even look at her. The bus stops, and this gentleman wearing dhoti comes on the bus. And I'm just sitting there crying, and I'm looking at him. I'm like, that's unusual, but whatever, it's cool. And I'm crying. And I guess he just saw me looking so sad and pitiful. And he just handed me a book and he just proceeded to walk on by and go sit and sort of look out the window. And, I'm like always, I always try to be nice and like open-minded. And so like I took the book and I was also just sort of like, what's going on? Um, because nobody's ever handed me a book randomly.
Mhm.
And I look at it and it's the higher taste.
Mhm.
Higher taste. And I'm just like, what is this? And I had always been an animal lover, so it's everything happens for a reason. And I'm looking at it and I don't really pay too much attention to it. I'm still sort of like teary-eyed, looking through the pages, and I see a picture of Krishna in it, and I'm just like, what? Who is that? And it was
Mhm.
just this. I can't say that I was immediately. like, oh, that's God, but I feel like I was on some level. Like there was just this feeling like, oh, like this is God. Who is this?
Mhm.
And I went home and I looked in the book and I remember I think the first thing I read was just the idea that animals have souls just like us.
Mhm.
And it blew my mind because, you know, during all of this chaos in my life, my mom had tried desperately to sort of put some structure, something that she felt was right in my life. And so she did enroll me in a Christian school for like
Mhm.
sixth, seventh grade.
Mhm.
And my experience was animals don't have souls. Like, what are you on about, Noe?
Mhm.
Like, why are you asking questions about animals? They
Mhm.
don't go to heaven. Like, what do you, and I was that like was it for me. So I had this sour taste. I had always wanted a connection with God, but that, being in the West, like our primary religion is Christianity, which I now see as something completely different than what they had shown me in middle school, I
Mhm.
do want to say.
Mhm.
Um, and so that was sort of a that moment on the bus was sort of a seed that was planted, you know,
Mhm.
and it
Mhm.
took a minute to grow. I wasn't immediately like, let me change my life, let me find out more about this. That was just not the case because the reality is I was 16 and I still had a few more years to go, 2 or 3 more years to go, living in complete chaos,
Mhm.
Um, but I would still frequently take that book out and read it and look at the pictures.
Mhm.
And it gave me like this intense sense of comfort when things were so chaotic and I just could not control anything. And it's so funny because frequently I would go out and I'd go partying or I'd do this and that, and I'd be all high and crazy in the streets of Waikiki. And then all of a sudden, I would hear like something, drums, or I'm like, what is that? And I'd go,
Mhm.
there's the Hare Krishnas, they're singing in the streets, and they're so blissful and happy. And every single time I would see them, I'd be like, oh my gosh, it's them. Like, I'd be just so overwhelmed with like, joy and just like so happy to see them because again there was just some I guess divine connection like I didn't know what it was at the time but it was just there was something there and I was just longing for it and
Mhm.
I feel like Krishna was speaking to me during this time and it's funny because I got my little crew my little riffraff of friends to go to the
Mhm.
temple at one point
Mhm.
and go eat prasadam and get a tour and everything. And, I was all like, oh yeah, what is this? What is this? With my friends. But like on the inside, I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, this is it. This is beautiful. But again, that seed was still just, it was planted. And
Mhm.
it wasn't until a little later that I started seeking things a little more seriously.
Mhm.
Because by the time I was 18, 19, I had decided, oh, heroin's a good idea.
Uh,
So, yeah. And so I had to go through using heroin with my mother, uh,
mhm.
doing all kinds of crazy stuff, and then getting arrested again for something. Finally, as an adult, it's very different getting arrested as an adult versus a
Mhm.
child.
Mhm.
And so I got arrested for the last time, and I was 19. And I said, you know what? This is not going well. My life is not going to end well. I was sitting in the cell and I was just thinking, I am an adult now. I had tried to get clean before, so I know it's possible.
Mhm.
I'm going to end up like my parents. And that is the last thing that I could possibly ever want. And so at 19, when I was released from my little cell and I given a court date. I went to court and I told my public defender, I said, just tell the judge I just want to get clean. Tell him I'm messing my life up with drugs and I just want to get clean. And so I went in there and we talked about it. And the judge looked at me and he said, okay. He said, you're getting probably the best deal in here, Noelani. I'm going to say that you need to seek treatment, go to rehab, and you'll be on probation for a year. And all your charges will be expunged after that.
Wow.
And so I was given quite the blessing. And I ended up going to rehab for about 90 days. Hina Mauka in Hawaii, shout out.
Mm,
And struggling, going through an insane withdrawal, by the way, that's painful. Getting the opiates out of your system is just awful. Your hair hurts, your nails hurt, your body. Oh my gosh,
mm,
terrible. But I did it, I handled it. And when I got out of treatment, I went into a clean and sober house. And I went to go home to go see what was really going on. And lo and behold, my father had moved to the mainland. So he had moved to Washington. And my mom was like in a 3 year treatment program. And
mm,
so everything in our apartment was just still there. Nobody had touched anything.
mm,
I was just like, well, I guess I'm on my own now.
mm,
So, and I always had been, but it was just like, it really cemented the fact that like, you're doing all of this and this is going to be all on you.
mm,
Which it's funny because it sort of reminds me of that they say a lot, Krishna takes things away from those
mhm,
that he really loves, right? So like,
mhm,
thank you.
mhm.
So yeah, and so I stayed in this clean and sober house and I met somebody. I met
Okay.
somebody, yes, and we started dating. We had known each other from the streets of Waikiki, and this person was super punk, and I was a candy kid, like smiley little happy rainbow bright girl. And so we never really messed around on the streets. We would just sort of pass each other by, like, what's up? But when we got clean, it was like, oh, okay, familiar. And so we ended up dating. And they were really into Buddhism.
Mm,
And so I watched them meditate and, go to a Tibetan temple, and I would go there too.
mhm,
And it was very powerful for me, very helpful in calming my anxious mind because, mind you, all of the trauma that I didn't even get into with you here.
mm,
All the things I had seen, my nervous system was shot. And so, again, my anxiety was so bad. My social anxiety, so bad. I could barely speak to people when I would engage with them. The fact that I'm talking to you right now is a miracle because there was a time where I would have just been mute, essentially. And so I got introduced into spirituality with him. And it's interesting because I still had Krishna in my head. And he was sort of a reminder of that unintentionally. And I had talked to him about it. And he's like, well, let's go to the temple. And I was like, huh, okay, like, let's do it. And so I went. And of course, like, it again, just like overwhelming, a Sunday fest, right? With all the kirtan, the food, the love, the joy, just like the deities, just everything, just and it just overwhelmed me. And I wanted to be there so badly. But again, there's those feelings of I'm so anxious and everybody here is so perfect. It's
mhm,
right. It's not true, but everybody here is just so much more together than me. And I'm just a drug addict. Like, I'm just, like what? I can't talk to anybody really. But I went and I kept going. And he actually bought me my first Gita and my first beads, my japa beads. And I just began meditating, chanting, reading my Gita. And, doing the thing. And
Mhm.
although he and I did not work out, I still
Mhm.
maintained that connection with chanting and reading the Gita and going to temple when I could, not really talking to anybody, hiding, but still being there, because I just wanted to see Krishna. I want to be around Krishna.
Mhm.
Um, and so I did that. Um, and I remember one day strolling around, I'm like, I need a job, dude. Like I'm an adult now. I'm a high school dropout. I've got zero skills. I know how to use drugs. I don't know how to talk to people at all.
Mhm.
My emotional IQ is really, I don't know. We don't know what's going on with that. But I was walking in Chinatown one day and I saw Govinda is opening soon. I
Mhm.
was like, what? Okay. And there was a phone number. And so I just called it. And mind you, not good on the phone, not good talking, but I just said, hey, I see you're opening a restaurant. I love going to temple. Uh, I love Krishna. If you need somebody, just let me know. And so
What
they,
option I see is Pignetta's restaurant on South
pardon
2nd
me,
Street.
Siri going off on
Oh my
Govinda.
goodness, just goodness. Siri wants you to go to Govinda's right
Yes, she
now.
wants me to go back. So, but anyway, they got back to me and really without knowing anything about me, they hired me. They're like, sure, yeah, we need help.
Mhm.
So that was basically my first job, really, was going to Govindas and serving prasad every day and just, enjoying the atmosphere and smelling the incense there and doing that. And we also had a food truck on the UH Manoa campus, and so I got to do that a lot too, which was it was a lot of fun. But it only lasted for about a few months or so, I would say, because I met someone.
Oh.
Once again, I met somebody, and it's really easy to sort of get distracted from what matters,
Mhm.
And I think I now have an understanding of what the importance is of association, right?
Mhm.
And,
Mhm.
I think some people look at that and they're like, oh, they don't want you to talk to anybody else or whatever nonsense, taking it as face value. But the reality is it goes for everything in life. Like, when we're kids, people say you are who you hang with, right? And so
Yeah.
even in the program, I spent a lot of time in 12-step programs, and there's this idea of like, you are who you hang with. You see somebody who has recovery you like, you go hang out with them, right? And so it's not something so different.
Mhm.
And so, again, me being so sure that I wasn't good enough to be a part of, the Vaishnava community, like I just sort of drifted a little bit. Uh,
Mhm.
and like I said, I got in a relationship and, I stayed clean. I was still a vegetarian because that was the one thing when I got clean off drugs and I
Mhm.
started working, or well, when I started going to temple way before Govinda's, I stopped eating meat because I was like, no, like absolutely not. And it was fairly easy for me. It was a something I really was into, and it was easy to stay a vegetarian. And so I did that and ended up moving to LA, which was very different, if you can imagine, from a small island
Mhm.
to a huge city. And so
Mhm.
adjusting to that was really difficult for the first couple years because, again, no social skills, no self-esteem really, no job skills, third grade math level, dropped out in eighth grade. And so I really had to get with the hustle and bustle of the city and figure out what am I gonna do. And so I
Mhm.
got jobs here and there, was miserable at these
Mhm.
jobs. But on occasion, I would go to the temple and I would just kind of just stay in the background. And I would go. And I remember the first time I went with my partner at the time. And I went and I was just standing there and I just started crying. He was like, wow. He's like, what's going on with you? And I was like, I don't know. I just feel so connected. It's so beautiful to me. And he just looked at me and he's like, he's like, well, they haven't started any wars or anything, so why not go for it, And so again, I would just sort of here and there go to temple, get up in the morning really, really early, read my Gita, chant my japa, and just sort of consistently go with that from, throughout my 20s. That relationship ends. And there's some stuff that I'm definitely leaving out, some insane stuff that I did while I was clean and sober. Um, but I did end up sort of losing my connection spiritually. And I think a lot of that had to do with not allowing myself to connect with other devotees and not feeling good enough to be able to do so. And so I struggled a lot more than, I probably needed to. It was quite difficult. And I'm sorry, I feel like I'm just a mile a minute over here. So you jump in if you have.
This is about you. This is about
Okay.
you today. Your story is really interesting. I have so many questions. Is your mother still alive?
Both my parents have passed away, unfortunately, due to their addiction. So it's a bummer, you know.
Mhm.
It's having to adjust with, I have a daughter now
Mhm.
who's incredible and amazing. She loves to offer Krishna butter on our altar. It's a very sweet girl. Um, but it's been really hard not being able to share certain moments with my mom because, again, my mom was very unwell. She was very sick because of her addiction, but she was a very sweet woman and she loved me. And matter of fact, I remember showing her the book I got on the bus, and she was like, "Oh, yeah. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare." Like, and she told me the mantra, like, and I was like, what? Because my mom was a hippie, and so she
Yeah.
was all about it. Like, she's like, yeah, they're great. Like, she just very supportive woman in general. She just could not get past her addiction.
Mm.
And so yeah, it's hard, not having your parents. I see my friends, they all have kids, and they're like, they can get their mom to help. There's
Mhm.
a grandparent involved, and I don't have that.
Mhm.
So it's been difficult.
Yeah, I feel you. The other question I have is how, if your parents had such addictions, how did they manage to become nurses in the first place?
You'd be surprised. But I will say a huge part of it is that the disease of addiction just progresses, right? And so
Mhm.
they became nurses and their addictions were, probably a lot more manageable until it wasn't. you know. So my father, for instance, his drinking, was like, okay, we're just going to drink after work and we'll be fine. Into I can't, like I have to drink, hey cat, um,
Mhm.
daily before I go to work. And
Mhm.
so, it gets worse and worse, but addicts are smart. Addicts are brilliant people half the time who are just emotionally having a lot of pain, typically, issues,
Mhm.
things like that.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, I can imagine. I've seen it before. I've known people, their parents are addicts, they are addicts, and it just like it's a generational trauma. It's really difficult to break it. Um,
yeah, definitely a
when,
family.
yeah, I mean, it's a shame you didn't feel so connected to the devotees in your time because many other devotees also come from similar backgrounds, isn't it?
Yes, it's true, but when you're in your mode of sort of self-centeredness, and not necessarily in like a cruel way, but it's just, it's just in a way like there's none of these people could possibly be as horrible as I am. I don't want to, you know, I don't want them to see me. I don't want them to see how just twisted I am because this is all so beautiful. I was a baby, I
Mhm.
had no concept of diversity in terms of culture, in terms of mental health and just family until I started studying psychology later. Up until then, I just was like lost.
So how did you get into your education? Now you're going for PhD, right? Pretty soon.
PsyD. Uh-huh, yeah, my PsyD.
So you mentioned before you were a high school dropout.
Yeah. Hmm.
So what has your journey been with your education and all of that?
Hard. Really hard, but very fulfilling and very life-changing. Um, so I never did well in school. When you are focused on trying to survive,
Mm,
things like, math problems or science
mm,
take a back seat. I don't care about any of that. And so I never really focused on my studies at all growing up. And
mm,
so for me, dropping out at in eighth grade, I would say, well, I got to ninth grade, but I never finished. So dropping out was just so much easier than trying to catch up with everything that I didn't know. I mean, by the time I hit high school, my math level, like I said, was third grade. Like I couldn't,
mm,
and I don't mean today's third grade. I mean like a 90s third grade, which is
mm,
way different
mm,
than the kids what they're doing today. But like as I got clean, I just knew I had to do something. I knew everybody else was like, go to college, go study, go do something.
mm,
And I wanted to learn. I didn't want to just be, struggling forever. And I enjoy learning. And so I just decided when my very early 20s, I was like, I'm gonna go to school.
mhm,
I'm just going to study. And it started off as, well, let me try veterinary medicine. Okay, let me
mm,
see if I can start with that. Nope, way too hard. Props to all the
mm,
veterinarians because the math and the science and that, I was just, with my level, couldn't do it. I was taking remedial classes. And so I said, okay, well, what about English? I'm really good at reading. I want to feel good about myself. And then I was like, no, because I don't want to just end up working retail and spending all this money on my degree? And so then it's so funny. It's such a journey, education.
mm,
Um, and then I said, okay, let's study child development.
mhm,
And so for the majority of my associates, because I had to get that, I didn't graduate high school, was in child development. And so I learned a lot, and I credit that first degree with the reason why I can parent my child, because nobody taught me how to parent. My
mhm,
professors did. So I did that. And then I think towards the very end of the semester, last minute, I said, psychology. I need to switch to psychology because the reality is, growing up, I had always wanted to study psychology. If I
mhm,
really thought about all the trauma I was living in, I
mhm,
had this sort of dream of, oh my gosh, maybe I can be a psychologist and help teen girls who are, as screwed up as I am. Maybe I can somehow use this mess here as a
mhm,
way to help. And
mhm,
so I ended with that. And then I ended up getting my bachelor's. And there's a whole, like I said, there's so much story in between the associates and the bachelor's, but I got my bachelor's, and at this point, I'm divorced. I'm a single mom, and I'm just trying to figure out how to survive. But I'm doing it. Um, and so I did that, all women's school, highly recommend. Salem College. And I had an amazing professor who was just like this old school hardcore psychologist. And I just fell in love and I was like, I'm on the right path. Ended up working in a acute psychiatric hospital.
mhm,
And I really enjoyed that.
mhm.
You really see a lot going on in there. That just,
Wow. Is it possible for you to talk about that a little bit? Is
yeah,
that allowed?
absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. Because I just won't violate anybody's privacy.
Yeah.
Um, but so yeah, so it was my first job after getting my bachelor's. And I was so excited.
Hmm.
It's like, this is it. And for the most part, initially going, I would roll up to work and I was so happy because it was so fun. Which is, some people wouldn't say that, but for me, it was so fun engaging with these beautiful, beautiful souls, these wonderful humans who are just at their absolute worst and who just need a break from
Mm.
this world out here, which can be really so overwhelming for so many of us. And I loved it. And I got to engage with clients who had depression, anxiety, but also severe trauma, or people who were suffering from schizophrenia, and completely psychotic and just throwing things and yelling and hollering. And um, just engaging with them on the day to day was just such a blessing for me. And just like I said, just being a good vibe in their life for a moment, it just meant a lot to me. And I ended up having to let go of that job because, without going too much into detail, I mean, those of us who live in the US, and I don't know about other places, but in the
Mm.
US, our healthcare could be better.
Mm.
And it's not great in terms of things like physical health. It's
Mm.
much worse with mental health. And so
Mm.
I saw a lot of really bad things
Mm.
from staff to client that I never, ever in a million years even believed I could ever see. Because why
Wow.
would you be working in mental health and making these people feel worse? What? It doesn't make sense, right?
There's Ratchet,
Yeah,
right?
they're
This,
okay, because that woman was probably based on somebody. She's a
yeah.
real woman. She may be, going by a different name, but she exists. And I had done everything within my power to sort of change it and be really positive, like, no, we can make change.
Mm.
Me against like $1 billion corporation.
Mm.
But I went to my boss. I went to their boss.
Mm.
I went to the boss of the entire corporation, even because,
So it's a corporation running this mental asylum?
yep, yeah, they run a lot of them. So, and that's not uncommon, it's a way to make money. And when we're just focused on, okay, let's fill beds and let's make money, the clients suffer. And so it's, I'm so thankful that I got to work there and engage with the clients. And I learned so much from these clients. And I always tell everybody, if you can work at this hospital, you can work anywhere. So do it, do it and see if you can make change, because maybe you can.
Mm.
But it's heartbreaking if you
It's
go in not knowing what to expect.
it's institutionalized abuse or
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I never saw any, I've heard stories of physical abuse.
Mhm.
But I always missed those
Mhm.
moments. But I definitely witnessed and saw a lot of verbal abuse, a lot of neglect as
Mhm.
well, even some malpractice.
Mhm.
And I will say that there were staff members who were on their best behavior with me, because I sort of came in with the mode of like, don't do something in front of me if
Mhm.
you don't want me to tell, because I will
Mhm.
ASAP, because I'm here for these clients, not for you.
Mhm.
And so I would hear things about certain coworkers. I was like, what? Like, how? But they knew not to really do too much in front of me.
Mhm.
I can't even.
So I would you say there's financial abuse going on there? Like the clients, I assume their families pay for them to be there, right?
I would go like as far to say they're could very well be some insurance fraud.
Mm,
You got to think that we typically engage with the community that is of much lower income.
mm,
And so the system can make you a lot of money when you're dealing with a community that most people don't really care about to begin with,
mm.
or at least that's what it feels like. And so
Okay.
I got out of there. Because again, I tried everything, and I'm somebody like I said, I study psychology, have for associates, bachelor's, masters, and for me, what was pounded in my head is our ethics. We have a whole thing of ethical guidelines, and so for me, I said, okay, well, I followed the guidelines. I told to everybody needed to tell. I changed it where I could. I tried, and it's not working. And so the next thing for me to do as an ethical person is to leave and to resign
Mm,
because I don't want to see what's about to happen.
mhm,
It's going to be not pretty. And sure enough, there was a hospital, it was a little outside of my state, but it run very much the same as the one that I worked at.
mm,
I want to say a couple months later, a gentleman died from neglect in the hospital. And so
mm.
there's a big issue. And so I always say, hey, anybody who has a heart, some empathy, some love, and really any sort of passion for mental health, if you can go and start applying to the hospitals, just go and try. I mean, I don't know what else to do at this point. You've got to just get rid of all the nurse ratchets somehow.
It's institutionalized, like trickle down. The top doesn't care, so
Why should
those
I?
beneath them
Yeah.
also will embody that. Yeah.
Mhm.
So how was this in a period where you were not practicing or
Yeah, so I wasn't practicing at all. And after my divorce and after just a whole bunch of other stuff that I will spare you, um, I just sort of lost my connection with all sense of spirituality. Started eating meat again. Started drinking, not alcoholically, but just like, drinking a glass of wine here and there or whatever, going out for drinks on occasion. And I just wasn't focused on that at all. And I will also say during this time, my anxiety again was like so bad. I had grown a lot and healed a lot. And so I could engage with people a lot easier and had a lot more confidence. I had been studying. And so I knew I was, worthy of something at this point, but I was still really struggling with my anxiety. I was still just like, like I can't stop grinding my teeth and I'm so tense and my body
mm,
still hurts. And so yeah, my connection had just sort of fizzled. And I've always had this little figurine of Krishna, however,
mhm.
I've had since I was 19. And he's always sort of been on a shelf, and so there's so many moments where I would pass by and just be like, oh, hey, Krishna, and just like, but not engaged at all other than that. And
He
he
was still watching you.
was still watching me. He
Yeah.
was absolutely. And I was still sort of acknowledging it, a little bit, but also knowing that was just not, I had to get lost, I think, in a lot of just, I want to swear, I'm not going to, but in a lot of just stuff, a lot of ugly stuff. I had to get lost in it before I could get to where I am right
Mm,
now, if that makes sense.
mhm.
So,
So it was kind of like I understand you because yeah, for myself also there have been time periods where I've just felt so hopeless and so like depressed and overloaded with things that like I couldn't even chant. I couldn't pick up my beats. I couldn't do anything. I felt like, life is against me and it's not that you really feel like God is against you or anything like that. It's just like you kind of forget.
that's exactly what it is. Yeah.
It's it's so easy to forget. And it's just like in those times when you see the devotees again, you kind of are like, wow, there's like a light in the darkness. Um,
100%.
I get that feeling from your whole bus story, when you saw that devotee with the dhoti. It was like sometimes it's really just like Krishna is just coming to you in a little way and giving
Mm-hmm.
you a little something, a little taste. So you got the higher taste, and
Yes.
so I noticed myself when I first became a devotee, I was also a little bit into rave culture and stuff, not so intensively like you, I think, but it was a time in my life where I just moved away from home and I was raving, and it wasn't the 2000s. I'm younger than you, I think, but it was still that kind of culture. And yeah, the drugs and everything, it's very hard on the nervous system. It's very hard on the body. As someone who has always been kind of delicate and sensitive, it was so hard for me. My health was really, really down. Lots of acne, digestive issues, feeling just problems in my whole body. And I feel like that those things in that period, it still like is in my system today, So similar like you, I think, this whole like even like pre-arthritis kind of stuff and feeling just too sensitive, like, whoa, I can't handle loud noises. I can't handle um, stress
Yes.
or like that because of this
Mm.
fried in the nervous system, So, but when I was in, that was when I was in Vancouver. It's, I think it's West Coast energy, a lot of, well, at least in Canada, I'm Canadian, so at least in Canada, a lot of the hard drugs like that do come in to Canada in the West Coast,
Yeah.
on the boats from China, from mostly China, I think. But
Yeah.
yeah, there's a very bad situation in Vancouver, Canada, with the like drug epidemic going on. I think it's even worse today than when I was there like 10, 12 years ago. So, um, I don't know if you've noticed any kind of epidemic rising in the US recently.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, two things I'm thinking of is like one, I work in urgent care for mental health, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
people come to me and my colleagues when they are absolutely in crisis and they need help right now,
Mm-hmm.
like now. And it keeps them out of the ER. It's like it's such a wonderful program, and it floors me that it's not in every single state, every single city. But I will say that I see a lot of, especially with the fentanyl, I see a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people using, and a lot of kids using,
Oh,
a lot of kids using. And, it's just, it's overwhelming to constantly witness
mm-hmm.
so many teenagers just struggling so greatly with such an ugly drug too, that there it's not even like, not the good fentanyl, but you know what I mean, it's not even like the medical fentanyl, it's like weird street fentanyl that's so
Mm-hmm.
dangerous, and these kids are using it. And also I went back to LA recently because I had to do my interview for the grad program. And so I went and I stayed for a few days. And mind you, I had lived there for years. And so going back, I don't know what I expected, but I didn't know it was going to be so much worse. So much,
Mm-hmm.
just the people who are on the streets who are very clearly struggling with their addictions, and just they've got nothing really. I mean, they're just suffering over there. And I just was, I was actually going to the temple, and I was driving there and I was just looking like, oh, like it's worse. And I don't know why it surprised me because again, that's the progression, right?
Mm-hmm.
All these drugs are coming in. It just not just for one person's addiction. It progresses for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
It's you're right. There's a huge shift, and I think a lot of it comes from life is so hard and they don't train us for how hard it is, you know?
Mm-hmm. Definitely, yeah. I feel like Krishna consciousness and actually being around devotees has made me a lot more tough in
Mm,
myself.
yeah.
I do want to share that when I was like 18 and doing, drugs or
Yeah.
hanging out with that kind of crew on the street, up all night, out all night.
Mm,
Um, I kept at that time I also started going to the temple. So I was having a really big kind of existential crisis about things. Coming from a very actually Christian family and kind of stable and going out on my own, I kind of lost myself very, very much. I had a really big existential crisis about things, and I was questioning everything. I didn't feel like I belonged in this world at all, but I felt like I had some certain beliefs about things. Like I always believed that animals had souls. I became a vegan when I was like 17, when I was still at home, and then I moved away from home. And I went to the temple, same like you, with my riffraff crew. And we walked in with our winter boots on. It was snowing outside. And so we walked in, and there was this sign in front of the temple door that said, "No shoes here." I thought it meant like no shoes in front of the sign. So we went in with the shoes on. So we're like, okay, we have to leave our shoes on. So we came out with our shoes on during end of Kartik time. And my friend and I, with her boyfriend and his friend, so two guys, two girls, we all stood on the men's side. And we were like, okay, what's going on here? We were wearing like our winter coats, and everybody's just offering these ghee lamps, and it was like, whoa, what's going on here? And it's like, oh my gosh, I was praying for a long time I was asking to meet, I was praying to Jesus actually to meet the real Christians, because I felt like I had such a um disenchantment with Christianity because of the whole meat thing, because of the whole animals thing. And people were telling me, Christian people would tell me, that's not good. You're vegetarian, that's not good. And I never liked, I remember when I was really into it, when I was a teenager in high school, we used to talk in the high school class, in the English class we're in. We had some kind of social studies or psychology kind of class where we talked about, oh, why animals this and that. And I remember one time I would even say something like, oh, animals don't have souls. I was, echoing this, but when I simply became a vegan overnight one day, because I did have a crush on a guy who was a vegan,
of course.
who was older than me. So I was like, okay, I gotta impress him. So I'm a vegan. I told my mom and my stepdad, okay, mom and dad, I want to be vegan. I just want to let you know you don't have to do it, but I want to do it. And within one day, I got such a clear and clean feeling in my body, because I think I hadn't gone even one day of my life without meat or dairy or
Wow.
anything. So it was like just within one day, I looked in the mirror and I saw my eyes like clearing, this kind of, I don't know. I just
The
looked in my eyes
glow.
and I felt like there was like water coming out, like my body was like clearing itself. And I was thinking, wow, there's really something to this. So I started to become friends with vegetarian Christians.
Oh, nice.
Um, so there were one or two around in my hometown, but coming from a very small town, all of the leaders and everything were like, this is not good, this is not right. And my stepfather, being a chef, loving his fried meat and loving his all of that stuff, they were always like, uh, you know, I always felt some disapproval about that. So then I had that kind of crisis where I was like, okay, when I moved away from, actually I moved away because I had a kind of epiphany, or I just woke up one day and I felt like something was telling me you've got to go to Vancouver. And then I ended up getting in with kind of rave culture. And I never really felt so connected to it as well because I I didn't first of all, I wasn't from there. I'm from East Coast. So it's a very different kind of mentality among people and just a different vibe in general. So I was like, I actually really don't think I fit in here at all. So I was praying a lot to Jesus. I had a kind of boyfriend who was just kind of a egomaniac and arrogant and overly educated type who was just,
I
would
know.
criticize me and everybody. And I was like, well, I don't really like you, but I don't have anyone else around.
You're
And
comfortable.
yeah, like you're at least an okay person enough.
Enough.
But no, he was also a vegetarian because his family were coming from Seventh Day Adventists, this
Oh,
kind of
okay.
Christian where they're vegetarian. And anyway, I was really a seeker and having a big crisis and partying all night was just terrible for my system. And then there was this brahmachari on the street, and he ended up giving me a book. And he was actually Russian, but he was fully like brahmachari outfit, saffron, everything. And I thought he was a Buddhist. And I said, "Oh, who are you? Are you a Buddhist?" He said, "Oh, no, not exactly." He just gave me one book. It was Beyond Birth and Death. I remember it. It was like an old copy, worn out. And I took that card, and there was a card in the book with the Maha Mantra, and I read the Maha Mantra, and I immediately felt better. I
Wow.
felt, there's so much dirt on us in this world. And if we are losing our practice, if we stop chanting every day, we don't realize how that dirt just overtakes us. Like,
It accumulates.
yeah, and other people around, they don't even realize just how much dirt is on them, really like in their eyes. And these days, when I meet some Christians, like evangelicals or whatever, who invite me to their house and they're like, well, what do you eat? You see that people who are pious, they feel attracted to the devotees because the devotees have a certain light inside
Mm-hmm.
of them. I will also share that when I first became a devotee, when I saw the devotees out on Harinam at a different time, there was this one kirtan leader, and I just saw a halo around him.
Yes.
Like, actually, he did have kind of white hair, um, but I really saw a halo around him just chanting. He just looked like, that painting of Mahaprabhu where he's just
Mhm.
like coming out of the
Yes.
water and he has this halo. He looked like that. Um, Shout out to Bhakti Peter if he's watching, probably not, but yeah, I just saw him like he has a halo, and I was like, wow, these are some kind of heavenly people.
Yes, I get
Um,
it.
and when I went first into the temple, that was the feeling I got. I immediately got that message like from Jesus. I felt like really connected to him. Like he was pointing at me and pushing me and telling me like these are the real Christians. This is the place
Yes.
that I've been pointing you to. Um, and what else can I say? It was a very
Beautiful.
special time. I also want to say that there is one Swami in ISKCON in Canada that I saw, and I was thinking about him quite a lot. Like, okay, this is a special person. And then few times when I went out, when I was on the street in the club or whatever, I was just standing outside. Everyone is smoking cigarettes or whatever. I felt like I looked over my shoulder, and I felt like I was seeing him there. I felt like,
Yeah.
wait, I maybe I was hallucinating. I don't know if he was actually there because it was quite late at night, but I just felt like, wait, he's there. And I was doing like double
Right.
takes looking over. But then I kind of got that feeling like, okay, they're watching me or
Oh,
they're,
right.
yeah.
But I was just having a conversation with somebody, and I swear it feels like when you are really needing association, Krishna's like, oh, here you go. Here's a devotee just randomly at a grocery store. Or you know what I mean? Just like you'll just run into these devotees and it's that's when I really feel like, okay, all right. Like, okay, Krishna, I hear you. You're talking to me.
For sure, for sure. If you do your sadhana, if you try a little bit, even a little bit,
A
in
little bit.
Krishna is going to reciprocate to you, and you're going to see it. You're going to feel it.
You're gonna
And
feel it. Yeah.
I've had times in my life where I've been really afraid of something. Like I remember just one time specifically when I was really worried about taking a flight somewhere and really worried about what's going to happen when I go there. I was standing in the line in the airport, and the guy in front of me, random guy, on his backpack, there was a pin of Narasimhadev. And
Layer of anxiety.
I
Yeah.
just, I just talked to him, and I said, "Excuse me, where do you get this pin?" He said, "Oh, I don't know.
Oh,
It was just, I went somewhere, and it was just there. I just picked it up. I just put it
that
on."
was for you.
And I just told him, this is a sign. Like he didn't know what I was talking about.
Like,
It's-
okay.
yeah, and there are
Wow.
always things. Yeah.
It really is. It's really magical when you really start paying attention to the little things. I mean, that's the one thing I will say is, despite getting complacent and despite me pulling away, Krishna never pulled away from me.
Mm,
And so, even though, like I said, I sort of went on this hiatus of just like, I don't want to say complete misery, but just like difficult challenges, right? That I didn't really need. I did end up circling back. Um, and I think that that's probably, I would imagine that's fairly common, a common
mhm,
experience.
mhm,
It it's been a lot harder. Life has been a lot harder when I'm not allowing myself to be connected to Krishna versus
mm,
when I'm like, okay, we're gonna do this. And so even for me, it took me a while of just sort of making mistakes and having to get sort of beat up out here in this world, in this Maya.
mm,
And it really wasn't until I want to say it was August. Um, And that's sort of when I started circling back because again, I had met someone, and and it really was not going well. It had started off well, but this person was struggling with their own issues and ended up having a full-blown addiction that I was not prepared for myself.
oh,
And so despite hanging on and trying for quite a while, it just became abundantly clear that this was just going nowhere.
mm,
And so after, 2, 3 years of trying to hang on and like, I can help fix this person because I work in mental health. I study psychology. I know addiction is a disease. Like I have empathy. It just wasn't the case. I
mhm,
can't do all the work for you. You have to also help yourself. And so it just got to a point where I had nothing, nothing. I was unemployed. I was finishing up my master's,
mhm,
and so I had no real resource other than student loans. And I was just in this twisted cycle of addiction with this person, fighting, making up, fighting, making up, just witnessing horrible, stuff and being horrible myself. Like, let me just say,
mm,
when we're not connected spiritually and when I'm not taking care of myself in the way that I know that works for me, I can be a pretty toxic individual.
mm,
But so like I said, I just got to a point where I was so desperate and I had nothing. And I said, you have nothing left. I remember literally just like, you've got nothing, and now all you have is God. And so you better figure something out, because I wanted out of this vicious cycle. I did not want to be, I loved this person, but I did not want to be with them anymore, because they were, quite frankly, in a sense, like really messing my life up with their choices. And then one August night, like I said, I'm just like, you've got nothing. And it was so weird. Um, I just was laying in bed and I was just like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I have nothing. And then it was just like this vision of Krishna came to me. I
Mm,
don't know. It was so weird because it was like 11 at night and I was just like in bed crying, not crying, anxiety, ball of anxiety, because I'm being transported back into my childhood with this person, essentially. I was raised by addicts and here I am again. And
mm,
now I have a child and she hasn't seen anything, but she will if we keep this up. So just, how anxiety works. It's just like this cycle that you're just like, I'm gonna just keep going with this, and we're gonna talk about how bad it's gonna get. And so yeah, I just had this sort of thought. It was like Krishna was whispering to me or
mm,
something. Um, and I just started praying and I just said, please, Krishna, help me. I
mm,
don't know how to get out of this. I don't know how to do this anymore.
mm,
And I went on YouTube and I just started listening to bhajans and
mm,
like fell asleep. And
mm.
guess whose birthday it was? When I looked the next day, happy birthday, Krishna, Janmashtami,
Oh, okay.
out that night where he sort of came to me, and where I got desperate enough where I was like, I needed his help,
Mhm,
it was his day. And I
mhm,
just, that to me was so mind-blowing because I
mm,
was like, I didn't even know. I'd
mhm,
been so disconnected that I wasn't paying attention to anything like that.
mhm, mhm,
And so when I found that out, I said, okay, so now we're going to change our life.
mm,
So I got my old japa beads out.
mm,
I
mm,
dusted off my Gita
mm,
and I just started praying daily,
mm.
chanting. It started off as just like one round daily,
Yeah.
reading a little bit, doing the best I could, while still living with this person. It took a couple months and I finally was able to end the relationship.
Mm,
And I was finally employed.
mhm,
Finally. Like it was just, it all happened right after this. Um, I was finally starting to feel better. And then I started chanting more rounds,
mm,
and then it became like 2 rounds.
mhm,
Okay. And then December hits and I'm like, you gotta like you gotta go back to what works, right?
mhm,
Okay, so
mhm,
stop eating meat. What are you doing? This is not healthy for you, I mean, I got off drugs when I was 19. I got off meat when I was 19, and I think my body sort of healed in a way where I need to not be eating meat anyway, right?
mhm,
So I cut that out. It was again surprisingly, shockingly easy. And instantly, within, I want to say a couple weeks, my energy was just increased. My mood was so much better. My anxiety decreased. My aches and pains were gone.
mhm,
And so it just kept slowly getting better. And now, where are we? Excuse me, Kitty. And now where are we? We're in April and I'm doing around 11, 12 rounds a day. Some being very mindful of what I allow into my mind, into my brain, being very cautious of the things, even the things that I watch, and even the things that I listen to, because I don't want to forget again.
Yeah.
Want to forget again. That is so scary because the massive shift in just joy and bliss and goodness that I have had in this last, short period of time has just been, it's too good. I just don't ever, why would I want to go back to that? And so now
Mhm,
I'm in this headspace where I'm like, giving myself grace.
Mm-hmm.
I'm growing at the pace that I can grow, trying not to lament all the time that I spent doing God knows what and not connecting to Krishna, and understanding that that was just part of probably what I needed so that I could get to where I am now. And I'm just doing things that I never thought I would ever do before. And I mean, a part of that is even just getting into the doctorate program. Like, I just, I was so scared just interviewing. I was so afraid, like, I wasn't going to get into anything. But then also being okay, just being like, okay, you're anxious. That's normal. But you know what? Krishna's going to give you what you need. And
Mm-hmm.
that's it. And if you don't get it, that's okay. You're gonna be okay. There's a reason, because I have to believe that Krishna is got my back,
Mm-hmm.
best interest at heart at all times. And if something is not meant for me in the moment, there's a very good reason why.
Yeah.
And so it's just been such a journey. And then even again with my taking new experiences on. Was it last weekend? I went to New Vrindavan in West Virginia, and what a beautiful, like, that place is crazy. It's
Mm-hmm.
so good. And I went and just, of course, immediately just started crying, just of course. And I'm just like so, like, comfortable in my decision that, this is where I need to be right now. And I'm so comforted also at the same time, and so aware that everything happens the way it needs to happen. And I
Mm-hmm.
had to go get beat up a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
or I could really come back and realize that, you know what, I am worthy. And at the end of the day, I can sit here and stress about not being good enough to fit in with other devotees or whatever nonsense my head is telling me. But at the end of the day, what really matters is, what does Krishna think? Does Krishna
Mm-hmm.
want me there? Oh, he does? Okay, so I'm good now. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just it's magic. It really is.
Mm. I feel like something I've noticed is once our personal practice um, gets better in itself, then we kind of lose that fear.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I don't care anymore. I mean, I'll have flickering thoughts, right? It'll just be like a little drive-by thought, and I'm just like, I'll be okay. Because
Yeah.
I know I'm comforted. Like I said, I know I'm gonna be okay. Nothing's gonna happen. I'm not gonna go into a temple and somebody's not gonna come up to me and be like, like, what are you
Yeah.
doing here? Like, it's so weird how anxiety works, but I know that now, and I know, again, like, I'm here for Krishna. I'm not here for anybody else at the end of the day. So why am I stressing about that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So let's talk a little bit about bhakti and psychology
Yes.
integration. So, do you see these things being related or intersected, or how does your practice and understanding help you in the psychology sphere?
I mean, the way I look at it now, it's so funny because I'll be reading the Gita and I'm just like, okay, I can see that Krishna is basically like the OG psychologist. When you
Mm.
look at it, it's true though. You look at it and he's just like, okay, calm down, Arjuna. Let's breathe a little bit and be present. Here's some grounding techniques for you so that you can be based in reality and not let your anxiety take you on overdrive. Like, that's essentially, what he's saying. And the fact that Krishna's provided us with the ultimate grounding technique. I mean, you said yourself, you say the Maha Mantra, and then it's just like, oh, okay, I'm grounded. I feel so much better, you know?
Mhm.
And it's so hard not to see the similarities. I mean, even in the Gita, when Arjuna is talking about how the mind is so hard to control, like the wind would be easier, and it's so true, and it's something that we as mental health professionals understand very well that once you've had your anxiety take over, it's really hard to get out of that.
Yeah.
And suffering through mental health issues is you can't just once you're there, you can't just be like, okay, I'm good now one day and like I'm done, you know. And so there's so many similarities throughout the Gita, and it's just it's phenomenal, and it's helped me so much in being able to compare the two and just see how, you know, my path of my studies aligns with my spiritual studies.
Yeah. Um, well, I believe that many of the fathers of modern psychology, they're coming from more of a European standpoint,
Mhm.
right? Freud, Jung.
Lots of, yeah, a lot of Jewish men, which is
Okay.
actually really, I mean, amazing to me. I always, you know, I'm like, thank you. Thank
Mm,
you, sirs. My daughter is Jewish. And so for me,
mm,
I'm like, yes, shout out. Like y'all like
mm,
really did this for psychology, but uh where it sort of ends, Bhakti can sort of like begin in a sense. Like they work together so well, you know, and so we can take what these amazing men did, you know, study what they came up with. Alfred Adler is somebody that I adore, and he doesn't get talked about a lot because he sort of made Freud mad at one point. They were colleagues, but he was very much aligned, his ideology was aligned with the Gita in many ways. In one way, it was okay, let's be uh, good people. Let's
mm,
be kind people and let's be productive members of society because that's going to ultimately help you with your mental health. And the Gita says the same thing essentially, you know, be a kind, good person. And so it's shout out, yeah, shout out to them, you know, and then let's also take what we have and what we know, um, and let's run with it because it fits like just
mm.
beautifully.
But I don't know if you know anything about it, but weren't there many people at that time, like Freud? I know he was interested in quite like esoteric aspects of the mind.
Mhm.
So as far as I don't know, I've heard this, I don't know if you can confirm or not, but that some of these psychologists in that time were looking to Eastern texts
Mhm.
as well.
I've heard a little bit. I've heard conflicting things. I will
Mm,
say that I've heard that there's been um, some where they have looked towards it, and then I've heard other people say no, that's not true. And so, quite frankly, I really don't know. I mean, I've heard that, you know, Jesus was in India studying
mm,
the Vedas, so it's like it's very possible, you
mm,
know. I mean, this is a belief system. This is a way of life that has been around and been so incredibly impactful and powerful for so long. So I really wouldn't be surprised if they did, because again, there are similarities.
mm. Yeah, for sure. So let me see. What are my questions here?
You know what I think is really interesting is the mental health,
Mm,
and there's still not easy for everybody to wrap their head around it, and
mm,
what having mental health issues is like and how to deal with it.
mm,
And again, I mean, I think, you know, in conjunction with professionals who understand the mind from a like scientific matter, right? From a behavioral health point of view is really important. And then also taking advantage of your spiritual health and doing what you can in Krishna consciousness to, you know, really heal is it's quite amazing.
mm. I want to say, is there a mental health epidemic going on right now in the
Yeah.
USA?
I think it's in many places, even in India. I was just reading there's like 40 million people who are struggling with severe anxiety.
Mm.
What's going on? Something is going on. And I think that we need to be a little more realistic about these issues, because it's like you wouldn't tell a person who is struggling with a physical ailment, right? Or diabetes or
Mhm.
some sort of cancer, like, oh, you're fine.
Mm.
You're fine. Just chant more or whatever. You know what I mean? Because, yeah, chanting is going to help you so much. Absolutely. There's
Mhm.
no denying that it's going to help, but sometimes we need a little extra something, whether
Mhm.
it be insulin or chemo or, a licensed psychologist who can help us navigate what we're doing in our lives. Because some
Mhm.
of us come here is seeking, something, but not even knowing how to articulate our feelings, not even knowing how to identify our feelings, and so it can be a deep mishmash of mess. And so
Mm.
there's definitely an epidemic, and I hope that we can really start thinking about what we're going to do about it.
Mm. So, would you say that your practice keeps you grounded in the work that you do now?
Oh yeah. Absolutely. I'm just I'm not sure that I could do the work that I do without it. Even though when I was in the hospital, I was somewhat disconnected, like my mood was a lot different. My whole outlook was it was a lot harder.
Mhm.
And now that my practice has gotten so much more regimented, I guess,
Mhm.
uh, and I'm so much more committed to it, I can go to work and I can get screamed at.
Mhm.
I can get yelled at. I can see the most devastating things and sometimes cry afterwards because it's sad, but I can still be okay and not take it home with me. And
Mhm.
that is uh, because I get up every morning very early
Mhm.
and I do my japa and my meditation and I pray and I beg Krishna, please let me offer this day to you and let me please remember that you are in with each person, every soul that I interact with.
Mhm.
And so when a client is berating me, because the poor person is just, they're suffering, they're like manic or they're doing whatever they're doing, they're not in their ideal state, and
Mhm.
so they're cursing me out. I can sit there, have a moment where I'm like, ugh, and then be like, Krishna, help. And then all of a sudden melts away. And I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, I'm here to help this person. It
Mhm.
doesn't matter, what I'm feeling right now. Of course, he's yelling at me.
Yeah, I feel like, I meet many devotees, including myself, who work in the spheres of like mental health, coaching, generally trying to help people figure out their existence in this world. And I feel like as devotees, we have that ability to bring this light to people.
Yeah.
Um, but in the beginning, it takes a lot to bring that light into yourself, isn't
Yes.
it?
It,
So,
yeah, this is not this is not like, I mean, you've heard my story a little bit,
mm,
and just this has been like an ongoing long time effort, and you can't go into a environment and have it be full of just pain and sadness constantly and expect to just be able to handle it on your own just fine.
mm,
You just
mhm,
can't. I mean, I've not met anybody able to do that. And it might look different for others, like for us, Krishna consciousness is what helps us get through it and keeps that sort of gives us that strength. And then for others, it might just be, being in a group therapy session weekly,
mm,
being in therapy themselves, whatever it is, like you can't just go in willy-nilly with
mhm.
with no support. It's not healthy.
Yeah. We know about, you probably know about, resilience,
Yeah.
resilience therapy and studies on that and the whole, um, I believe it was in Hawaii, right? This,
Possibly.
the original resilience, studies that were done, right?
Yeah, I have actually not read I've read a lot of studies on resilience, but I have not read maybe the original ones from Hawaii. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, it was where the researcher was looking at generational resilience, or it was actually a longitudinal study,
Okay.
right? Where the researchers, I think it was in the 60s maybe, they took a small group, a small community on some island in Hawaii, I believe, and watched them throughout their life,
Hmm.
the children, how they grew up. And they found that children who were in, um, I don't know, what do you call it, negative impact situations where maybe their parents were not present, or they were, the children of addicts, or raised by one single grandparent or something like that, or there were more than 4 or 5 children in the home, so they weren't getting enough, attention from parents. They found that um, those children who had support in any kind of way, especially if they had support from even one other loving adult, like
Yeah.
one other teacher or anybody in their childhood, even in a small way, they found that those children would grow up and be like at the same level of normal as children who had stable home family lives.
It's
Yeah.
true. Yeah, everything that I have studied has said the same thing. And it's actually something that I tell clients when they bring their children in, the parents of the client. I always say, look, we know that if there is one positive influence, if there is one parent who is just present and trying, that kid is probably going to be okay.
Mm,
So just to give them some sense of peace, because it can be really hard to watch your child just struggling and struggling, especially when you don't feel like you're doing a good job or
mm,
when there's not enough support. But it's so real. And I mean, I can say, because I really didn't have that. And so I will say my 20s and whatnot were a lot harder probably than they would have been otherwise. I had to figure out most everything by myself, and it was not easy
mhm.
at all.
Yeah. So, a few final questions, few final reflections, because we've been talking for quite a while. So, if you could speak to your 16-year-old self on that bus, what would you say to her now?
I would probably tell her to not be afraid to ask for help,
Mm,
honestly. I think that even like throughout my story, and I'm like, oh, I don't belong at this temple. I don't, even with that, if I could have just said, hey, help me, and however it would look, I think that probably would have saved me a lot of suffering. But asking for help is really hard,
mm,
really scary.
mhm. Okay, final question. I think you may say a similar thing. What message would you share with someone who is struggling with addiction or spiritual disconnection right now?
Well, definitely don't be afraid to ask for help, but also most of us who are going through whatever we're going through have good reason to be suffering on some level. Being human, regardless of if you've been abused or traumatized, it's all relative, right? And so life is really, really hard. And so I always like to let people know that you're normal. What you're
Mm,
feeling is just normal. It's hard. Life is really hard, but you're doing it. And you're going to suffer a little bit, and that's okay. But just don't give up and just,
mm,
just keep going, even though it is hard. And a lot of people, they don't like to hear that. Don't give up. Oh, I'm so tired. I know you're tired, that's not going to change. What is your other option? Just
Mhm.
keep going. Because quite frankly, I think that myself, I'm proof that if you want to have a good life, if you want to change, you can, and you can have everything that you've ever wanted. You might have to suffer, but you can change. So that's my thing. You're normal, you're
Mhm.
okay, and you got this. Yes.
I think I needed to hear that also today. So thank you so much, Noelani.
Yep.
Lovely to have you on. Hare Krishna.
Yeah.
We wish you all the best. And
So,
goodbye to the viewers. And we can stop recording now. So
okay.
thank you.